All right. Good morning, everybody. It's now 11:30, June the 16th, and we are ready to go with our Wednesday Naples Mac User Group meeting. Welcome to all of our members from all around the world and throughout the United States and Canada. Our meetings are each and every Wednesday through June 30th, which is only 2 weeks from today, and then we will resume again on September the 1st. The meeting time is always 11:30 a.m. to 12:45 p.m. You must be a member of Naples Mac User Group or an invited guest of one of our members to attend our Zoom meetings, and that's for Zoom security reasons. We have 42 of these meetings each and every year, and we welcome you to today's meeting. We're very excited to have at our meetings. We have actually 14 other user groups that some of their members have joined us at Naples Mac User Group, and we welcome all other user group members, and we encourage you to get your friends and so forth from your user groups to join our group also. We want you to stay a member of your existing group. Most of the other groups meet once a month. We meet every week. And so a lot of people around the country, a lot of Mac User Group members are beginning to realize that if they want to fill in their month with more meetings and more excitement, that we're the place to come. I want to welcome our new members from the last couple weeks. Jeff Bond from Melbourne, PA. Richard Matthews, who just recently rejoined from Naples, Florida. Barbara Rode from Naples, Florida. Beth and Kendall Simon from Arlington, Texas. And Gail Netkemper from Terre Haute, Indiana. We welcome all of you as new members to our group, and we're thrilled to have you join us. We'd like to encourage everyone, our members and anybody visiting our meeting today, to please take a look at our website. We're very proud of it. It's been designed by Jenna Cox, who lives in England, and Mike Kwasniak, who also is in England, but with the Mac User Group, and his group back in Suffolk also, who maintains the site for Naples Mode. Here's an example of our meeting schedule. Our meetings are scheduled all the way through the end of the year, and all you have to do is check the website, and you can also see a list of our meetings through 2021. Just some announcements on some meetings coming up. We have scheduled already our meetings through December. You'll begin sometime in the summer to hear more about those meetings. And as you can see, these meetings are planned far in advance, very well thought out, and there's a lot of work that goes into the whole process. The meeting on the 30th, which will be our last meeting, will be Mitch Bryers and Jeff Bohr, and they will be talking about WWDC 21. That meeting was on June last week, or the week before, excuse me. And that'll be a great meeting. Lots of exciting news from WWDC 21. On our meeting on June 23rd, Wayne Mertz will be leading this meeting. Wayne is a member of our board and a member of the Naples Mac User Group for many, many years. And Wayne will introduce everything he loves about his Tesla and a 1,500-mile trip. I'm assuming that he might have picked up his car, possibly in California, and drove it back. And we'll hear all about the exciting Tesla. And along with Wayne will be, I believe, Eckert and Jeff Bohr, who will both be assisting him in the presentation. And they're also proud owners of the Tesla. And today we welcome back Dennis DiGiacomo, our security expert and the security expert for Southwest Florida. And we welcome you back, Dennis. We're thrilled that you could do this meeting, and it's all yours.
Cool. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, or almost afternoon, I should say. So my name is Dennis DiGiacomo. For those of you who don't know me, I've been with Apple Computer now a long time, probably greater than 35 years. Started the very first stuff they come out with to where we are today. Also licensed in Microsoft as well. So you got to play for the dark side during my job as well. So I do both, best of both worlds, but really I am primarily Apple and do everything with Apple. And in the last couple of years, I've been really big in, I've always done forensics, but gone to the next level where now we're working with Kerry Kursky and other firms, including the NSA at times with cyber security, cyber defense. And it's been really interesting and where things are going. And it's just going to be really, really a lot more bad things are coming our way versus good. And I'll explain some of that as we go through the lecture here. There's good things that come out of this as well, but just keep in mind, it's going to be a rocky road ahead of us with the technology that's coming our way. Feel free to ask questions. I think Sheeta's going to take care of us as we go through all this. So if anything pops up or anyone has questions, just let me know. I can stop and answer those. Really, as of this month, we're going to talk about some of the latest trending threats that are affecting so many iOS and as well as Mac OS platforms. We're going to talk about in detail a little bit with antivirus, anti-spyware, in regards to ransomware, whether or not do you need antivirus or anti-spyware? Should we be worried about this? How do we defend ourselves? So we'll discuss what's worth it and not worth it. A little bit on home automation, because all this stuff, as you hear in recent headlines, as we get to the next couple of slides, home automation is going to be a lot of security concerns that actually are going to go into effect in this month and the next month. And we're going to start seeing a lot of things that's going to make people nervous and probably cost a lot of money to get some things fixed for some. We'll also talk about, since the M1 Macs are here and Apple's trying to move over to the new silicone, we're going to talk about some third-party peripherals I think are important to keep in mind when purchasing and preparing for the next new systems coming our way. And I'm not going to go into any detail other than at this slide telling you, whatever you do, have a backup. And of that backup, have a backup of the backup. And if not, have a third backup. So have as many backups as you can, both local and cloud-based. It's important. I kind of just tell that to everybody I meet. You know, it doesn't matter what it is. It's just important because nowadays everything we do is virtual. It's in our computers. It's in our phones. And unfortunately, a lot of folks, they get into a habit, and a lot of them are uneducated, not like the Mac users group folks, but most people assume that iCloud's backing up all their stuff, or the computer's just doing it, or the phone should have it. They don't realize there are steps you need to take to make sure that all your data is backed up, not just pictures or contacts or a calendar. We want all of our stuff backed up. And so things like Time Machine, Super Duper, Carbon Copy and Cloner, as well as like Backblaze or even Carbonite for some, iDrive.com. These are sources, places to go to make sure your data is backed up, and do it often and have as many as possible, because at some point in time, all this stuff is fallible media and it will fail. So let's break right into it right away and get everybody nice and scared right off the bat. So hold on to your seats. All right, so latest Apple threats. There's been a whole bunch out there, but we're going to start over in China, since that's where 92% of all Apple products come from. And that's everything from the iPhones, the iPads, the desktops, laptops. A lot of stuff comes out of there in components as well. Well, since 2016, China and Apple have been going head-to-head far as who's going to hold the rights to the iCloud servers for China. And of course, Apple thinks they should be on US soil, which I agree with. And the cloud keys, which keeps them safe, the security keys to the iCloud, be kept here as well. Well, recently, as Apple fought China over all that, and considering since most of the stuff is made there and political issues going on in the world as well, Apple kind of gave in, which, you know, Apple never gives in to anybody for anything. This is probably one of the first times I've actually seen Apple cave. And so they did just that. They had no choice and complied. And so now the disagreements about where the digital keys are kept, they're also ultimately now kept in China and not on US soil. And that's as of May of this year. So this decision has been recent. So what does that mean for me and you? Not a whole lot, but you know, it's any data that's collected via iCloud in China on those servers have to be, you know, that data stays on their soil. So just hopefully US stuff stays here, their stuff stays there. We have nothing to worry about, but that does mean in theory, and if China wanted to, Chinacom, they can invoke those passcodes and get into people's data if they absolutely need to. So I can't speak for China how they do things other than what you see on TV and what you hear in the movies. I do believe, though, they are very big in controlling people's data and communications over there. So I wouldn't put it past them to state that they may do that for certain individuals in that country. So you're going to see coming up on iOS 15, I'm sure Mitch and Jeff will be talking about it in a meeting toward the end of the month, that Apple's changed a few things. So they're focused on big on privacy, as you know, and they're trying to keep apps from tracking us and all those different things. So you're going to see Mail's going to have a hiding feature. You'll be able to cut and paste from one area of an application, maybe from Facebook, and paste it into Twitter, and there will be no trace or track of it to know where the source came from. So there's going to be a lot of things going on behind the scenes to give you a little more right to privacy and where things come and go. And the developers won't be able to see it as well unless they're testing it within their own app, but no one else will be able to see it, which is good. And there's more to follow, and I'm sure those guys will talk more about that. I bet you didn't know, but back in the fall, back in November, December, just into Christmas, Apple made a mid-production change, which they normally don't do. So the chips that come out, the Bionic chips, the A12, A13, the S5, which are in a lot of our equipment, iPhones and iPads and things, what happened was, I'll talk about the bugs coming up. There's been some issues where there's some possible breaches to the equipment. So they actually made changes in the security storage components themselves and updated security enclaves. So what that means is they changed the way that the chips are produced and had to make configuration changes to keep the processing going and to avoid the security breach that poses a threat. So we'll talk more about that coming up. In 11.3, it's back in April, it patched the vulnerability so that your sensitive data wasn't being accessed on a computer if you open up a spoofed document. So if you got something in an email and you clicked on it, and we were just hoping that you didn't do that and it opened up something in a computer. But Apple actually stopped that, and so we're in pretty good shape. So to this date, so far we're safe with Apple. There's no other further steps you should take at this point regarding that stuff. Unfortunately, a lot of websites out there, they talk about malware threats and they talk about spyware threats and ransomware and viruses. And a lot of them have to do with the companies who protect you or say they do. Intego, Viper, AVG, Bitdefender, Malwarebytes, Norton, McAfee. There's a whole bunch out there. And of course, they're in the business to make money. On Windows, it's a whole different story. That's just a whole nother nightmare. And those products do work over there, especially Malwarebytes. That's one of my favorite things to use on that platform, and it does work. On Apple, we'll talk about that stuff later. Other issues we got to worry about in Big Sur. So it's our latest operating system. In May this year, Apple released 11.4 and some update variants with that. Just basically addresses a 0-day vulnerability that can allow people to piggyback apps like the one we're using today, Zoom, to either take screenshots of us, and look out there, Georgia, taking pictures of you right now, or record the screen. So it's kind of scary that these things were going on behind the scenes, but Apple never lets you know what's going on when it comes to security, because they actually have a very big system in place to look at all the potential threats. And there's a lot of people out there that are paid to hack and do things. A lot of them give a lot of things down below where I say proof of concept. They prove something, and then they send it to Apple saying, here's what we find. And Apple addresses it and hopefully tries to fix it. But with that said, the next thing down says, find my network. Now, the AirTags are coming out. We'll talk more about that soon. But basically, there's a security researcher named Fabian Braulein, and he was able to take non-internet connected devices and upload basically a message through nearby Apple devices to get the data out there. So really, we're taking use of the iOS system, and from near field communications to Bluetooth to Wi-Fi, cellular, it's able to work within these devices, transmitters, and send itself from one to another and get basically from point A to point B somewhere. It's proof of concept. It does work. They proved it can happen. The problem with it is it's one of those things that Apple blocks everything it can see, but if it's actually already behind the curtain, it's already where all the safety, everything's supposed to be safe and secure, and it's encrypted, it's hard to detect something that's actually already part of your regular normal usage data or your system. So the problem is Apple may not be able to prevent something like this from happening because of its own privacy focus as well as its encryption in the way the system is set up. So there are people finding ways around Apple, and rightfully so. I just found out recently there's over 1 billion iPhones in use right now around the planet. That's a lot of technology, a lot of equipment just from Apple. And Apple is really working hard to try to keep that safe. And believe me, people are being paid big money to go after Apple and to find a way to break into the systems. Some of the Mac OS threats themselves, people often wonder how many viruses exist for the Mac. Well, in the next slide, you're going to see a list of things. But, even Apple itself, does a great job. Mac malware does exist, and that's because people are really working hard to try to find a way to breach the system, especially the phones, because if you can bring down phones and communications, you take down a whole network. Android phones are susceptible to viruses and spyware. Apple so far is not, which is great. But just remember, a lot of the Macware stuff you hear about or read about and what they call viruses are rarely ever found in the wild. And I'll explain that as that a lot of times these things are downloaded from different applications, from different people's computers, file sharing sites, or buying something or going to a store that's not really sanctioned by Apple and or Microsoft, so to speak. And when you install this stuff, it actually has malicious software encoded in it once it gets in because you gave it permission to. And if the Apple system's underpinnings like XProtect and the gatekeepers don't see it, then it has potential to do something untoward. You heard about the WannaCry ransom virus that affected our national healthcare system back in 2017. It only targeted Windows machines and not Macs. I can't tell you how many people back then went out and tried to put antivirus on a Mac because they didn't want to get the ransomware, even though I told them it only affects Windows-based computers and not Macs. So oftentimes when you hear stuff on TV or a news headline, remember you have an Apple product, you are safer than most. So try not to, go and bolt down the shop if you don't have to. Apple has a lot of protection in place. If you try to install something, if you haven't realized since Catalina, especially in Big Sur, in the old days, I can go buy an HP printer, you put the software in to install it, and it just runs. You just put your password into the system and it gets installed and you're using your printer. Today, you start the software and ask you a million security questions. Do you know the developer? Are you sure you want to do this? Give it permissions in the security and privacy settings to allow it to talk to this folder and that folder and use the, it's a lot of work now where a lot of people don't even know how to use their products because they don't realize they have to go 5 places to allow something to actually function. So convenience and security, you can't have both. So I think the security side is actually very nice, and it's a pain, but getting used to doing it, it's actually a good thing. And Apple makes sure if something's not blessed or doesn't recognize the developer, it says, "Are you sure you want to, install this?" Now I've got a few apps that I work with the forensics that I can use, and I know the developer, and I put them in, even though Apple yells at me about it going in the system. But I already know where it's coming from. But most people, if it's not coming out of a store like Microsoft store, app stores or coming out of Apple's app stores, then really you should think twice about installing it unless you really know the developer or something you've used in the past. Now, in 2020, even to now, Mac malware itself has decreased on the Mac and iOS platforms, decreased. So we're not completely safe from attacks, but I'm telling you, it's decreased. So I just want you to keep that in mind. Now I'm going to scare you with all the fun bugs that affect Apple. Here they are. Less than 40 since 2016. Microsoft has got hundreds of thousands of strains, so I think we're doing pretty good. So Something to be concerned about though, right off the bat. Remember back in November, I told you that the M1 chips had to be kind of updated and re-put back out there. Well, the Silver Sparrow, uh, it's basically malware that actually can affect through a JavaScript installer from Apple to get into the processor itself. So the M1 itself, brand new processor, brand new silicone, brand new to the world, has already got a bug that Apple's already patched. But it just tells you that even new stuff gets here, there's always somebody trying to find a way into it. And not to mention, there are not just one or two people working on a project. You got hundreds, thousands, or teams around the world all working on a common project. So things can be introduced or missed easily. So it's a lot of work trying to create a new chip, a new process, or a new language. So there's a lot of holes that need to be patched or looked at. And plus some of the protection and things Apple puts in place can also be used to piggyback the bad stuff and never be detected. So that's kind of one of the things we're starting to see coming out now with all these new bugs. They're hiding within plain sight and can't be detected. But just so you know, what bugs have been not seen in the wild, to date since 2016, these are all the ones here. Now, oddly enough, these are all been reported by Malwarebytes, who I love on the Mac, on the Windows computer, because they kill a lot of bugs. Now these things here, if you look at the far left-hand column, you'll see 80% or almost 81% of the known detections, what we call generic suspicious virus. Basically, it's a fake malware warning pops up on your computer while you're surfing the web, says you must install this protection, and says it's from Apple or something like Mac Keeper, Mac Cleaner, Mac Advanced Cleaner. There's a bunch of them that pop up, and so people just think, oh, that's something I need for my Mac, and they click on it, and then these things get in the computer. But they haven't really done anything malicious, other than it's been a handful of computers affected for as many that are out there, and they've already been patched. So and this is all done by Apple, so you don't need to buy Malwarebytes to clean this out of your system. It's already built in to Apple as far as their X-Protect and the Gatekeeper stuff. And Apple always updates their stuff, and they'll do it behind the scenes. And that's an important thing to know. You don't have to worry about updating your definitions for antivirus like in anti-spyware like you do on the Windows computers. You constantly have to make sure they're up to date. Now, it doesn't mean Apple can't get something, but right now, everything you see named there, they're all kind of scary looking, and they all do something or did something. But realistically, they've all been stopped and put aside. So the fires are out with those things, which is great. Now, there's more stuff coming, but these aren't too bad.
Can I ask you a question?
Go ahead.
So are we to assume that most of these viruses get on our computers via surfing the web? Or
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dennis.
Absolutely. Well, so basically, like I joke all the time with people. I said, I don't have any problem with Windows computers. I don't. It's because when they get on the internet, I got a problem, because that's where all the bugs are. And because Windows is like dominoes, you smack one thing and the whole system goes the haywire. Apple's different. Apple, you hear about the old sandboxing techniques. Everything sits in a sandbox. So if a sandbox gets infected, the whole computer doesn't go. It's just that sandbox, and they can remove it or clean it and then rebuild it. Whether it's like, say you opened up an Excel spreadsheet and got a macro bug, well, it only affects Excel. It didn't affect anything else in the computer. So I can actually delete Excel, reinstall on the Apple, and pick up right where I left off, and life is great. Windows, I might be reinstalling the whole operating system or trying to figure out how to get my data back if I didn't do a backup. So totally different things between two different systems. These things are out there, but most of the time they all come in forms of a lot of people don't want to pay for software. If you haven't seen these days, I mean, years ago, people used to share Photoshop and Illustrator and stuff, or buy one license and try to squeak it on 5 machines because it was expensive. Mm-hmm. And now everything's changed. It's all subscription based. Because of that, Microsoft Office is $69 or $99 a year. Dropbox costs money. Now you're paying for what am I missing? Subscription based. Oh, Adobe products you got to pay for. I mean, so everything, iCloud, everything is subscription based. Nothing is you buy it once and keep it like we used to. Now we're totally having to pay subscriptions, and people don't like that. So they're trying to find ways around it. There are hacks, pieces of software out there. So they call them torrent sites or websites where you can say, hey, I want a free version of Microsoft Office for Mac 2019 version, and you can download it and install it in your computer. And for the most part, I can tell you they do work. But oftentimes it's kind of like, well, when you put that in, you're also giving permission while it's being installed to add a little something extra. That's usually a bug. Or what happens is when you download programs like Microsoft Office or Photoshop, because you don't want to pay for a subscription, things like, let's see, the bird miner could be in there. And what that does is those things tend to turn your computer into what we call a host computer for mining of cryptocurrencies. So even though you go, God, my computer's been running slow lately, and maybe you think it's just because you put Big Sur on it or you updated the Catalina or the last security update, it may not be that at all. It could be that behind the scenes, one of those, the bird miner is running, and what it's doing is it's turning your computer into processing power to help mine cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin around the web. And you get a bunch of computers, what they call a cluster, then you get greater computing power. And that happens without you giving it permission. So those are things that happen behind the scenes. You don't realize they pop into your system because you're thinking, well, I got an Apple, I'm safe. But if you put in bad software that didn't come from Apple or Adobe, that happens.
Right. All right. Thank you for that. That's very interesting.
Yep. But honestly, guys, everything you see on the screen, do not be afraid of because it has been fixed. More stuff to come, but right now we're sitting pretty. So
Don, unmute yourself and ask that question.
Yeah, how can we detect that we're being used for Bitcoin mining? Should show up on Activity Miner?
no, that stuff that's going to be running invisible. You will not see that.
Thank you.
But Apple fixes things, and I'll explain how Apple does their process. So it kind of gives you a little peace of mind, but also a little bit of unsettledness because you're not sure if, like you just said, how do I know if it's actually doing something or not doing something? I will tell you, for the most part, 99.9% chance, I am sure your computers don't have any of these issues, as long as you've got newer operating systems and you've been up to date with security stuff. And even then, a lot of stuff's been squashed. So I don't think you're going to see that. Now, there are other stuff out there that we haven't seen yet, maybe infecting us, but that's a whole nother story.
But would Malwarebytes find that?
No, I'm going to tell you why. So
Okay.
I'll answer that question early, in case I forget it later. So just so you guys understand, antivirus programs and anti-spyware programs like Malwarebytes, okay, or Norton, because you guys hear Norton and LifeLock, Norton Utilities, they only protect against less than 7% of the known bugs on the planet. 7% of the known bugs. 93% of the crap out there we don't even know about, because we're talking at levels of government, high level hacking, all kinds of things that we, nation state stuff we don't see. Things are taking down the pipelines, our meat systems, our healthcare systems, trying to get in and break something all over the planet. Like, I don't know what happened with Spirit Airlines yesterday, but again, they had a software glitch. Who knows? Not everybody reports a hack right away because they don't want to freak everybody out, but there's a potential for that. And I'm sure we'll hear. I haven't heard this morning, so I don't know, but they may have or gave a reason why. But so Malwarebytes, you have to understand, all these companies are in business to make money. Now, since Apple's kind of this whole new thing to them because more people are buying Apples and they feel that their stuff should be on there too. Now, Malwarebytes, I tell you, I do like. I'm not going to dog them. They're one of my favorite companies because they fix more PCs than I can tell you and save a lot of people's butts. They really do. I'm very impressed with them. But a lot of people, when they download software, both Mac and Windows, whether it's antivirus or anti-spyware, they only put the free version or trial version on and never decide to pay for it. So now they're on this assumption, oh yeah, I put that on my system and it hasn't ran in a year, hasn't been updated in a year, because you mainly have to push the button to do so. After a certain point, you have to pay for it. Oh, and there again, got to pay another subscription. So people go, I don't really need it. I'll just push the button when I want to. That's not how that works. So active protection. So the crazy part is Apple already has all its stuff built in. Apple has it. They just don't go out and tout it. You don't have to add a third layer of security. And most of the time, everything that these programs can protect against is already a known bug. So the Silver Sparrow has already been patched by Apple, and if it's also been fixed, or the generic suspicious ones, as we go back to the bring it up here, so you can see it. The generic suspicious one here on the left, the first one is 81% of the infections that were accounted for by Malwarebytes. Malwarebytes can fix all those things, but Apple's already done it themselves. So why pay for something after the fact? I think the problem is, you get infected and then all of a sudden it gets reported. They try to find a fix for it and then they get it out there. But Apple's already doing that behind the scenes. Apple has yet to say, please buy an antivirus and recommendation. They're doing it themselves. One thing people forget, Apple built the whole entire core of the operating system around a security system. Apple starts with security at the core. Microsoft doesn't. It's after the fact. So that's why there's issues. Do I think that there's merit in putting Malwarebytes on the system? I would say it doesn't hurt, but anytime you put an antivirus or anti-spyware on a computer, Mac or Windows, it does slow it down and it tries to get involved in a lot of processes. The biggest thing I have a problem with, and this is, I want everyone to understand this, is oftentimes there might be a threat. It didn't get into your computer, and let's say Malwarebytes has a fix, and you applied it before the Apple had a chance to do it, or you did your security update. You just did Malwarebytes first. If Malwarebytes gets a detection, detects malicious activity, then it wants to quarantine it or fix it or patch it. Usually quarantines it, just kind of takes it out of the mainstay. See, it saw something funny and wants to remove it, so it does. After it does that, it may have actually quarantined healthy code that was there from Apple or another program. So now you have now Adobe's broken or Apple, your computer's acting wonky. Now you think you really got a virus because it's acting wonky. And here, all you did was Malwarebytes actually broke it as opposed to knowing it was a real bug or not. So I always try to stick with Apple. Right now at this point, I'm following Apple's lead, letting them deal with the security stuff. And it gets to a point where, hey, look, you're going to hear from me when I say, guys, put Malwarebytes on or put on Viper or Norton, do something like that. But until then, I'm saying no, and you'll see down in my lecture, I still say no for now because it's just not there. It's not helping you. I know people feel like, well, it's like I feel like I did something good by putting it in there. It's got to do something. It's actually doing nothing, if not making the computer run slower. And I'll discuss that later. But that's one of those things I don't really recommend it.
All right,
Virus,
thank you, Dennis.
you're welcome. I know it's long-winded.
That's all right.
Viruses themselves, it's kind of generic because it's just a big word up there, but really malware is what we've focused on. Malware is all the goofy stuff, and everything below malware, that includes your adware, things that pop up on your computer, or what they call PUPs, or potentially unwanted programs like Mac Keeper, Advanced Mac Cleaner, Mac File Opener. People go, hey, I don't have Stuff Expander on my computer, and I want to open up a file I got compressed, and they go download a free one off the web. Again, everything's free. Nobody wants to pay for anything. And then they install it and then realize they didn't realize something malicious happened to their computer. So really, it's better go to the App Store to find things. But Apple has all these things built in, so you shouldn't have to do these things. But if you do see something on your computer that pops up and says your computer's we detected a virus or a spyware or adware, and it wants you to call an 800 number, that happens quite often. That is usually the response out of Mac Advanced Cleaner, Mac Keeper, Mac Space Reviver is telling you running out of space. And if you run this program, it'll free up your hard drive. And the sad part is everybody assumes it's part of Apple's computer. It's actually not. But because they surfed the web and a pop-up, a website itself was hacked, or the website itself had security breach and these things pop up, or they were surfing someplace they weren't. And usually what happens, hate to say it, everyone's reading the news nowadays, right? Because we can't get enough of the news out there. And so as you go to different, I don't care where you go to look at news, whether it's the Wall Street Journal, whether it's New York Times, whether it's USA Today, you can get into stories, start reading them, and usually down the list, it says click here for more on a different story, or you'll see something catches your eye, whether it's political or comedy or whatever you're looking for. You follow these links. Well, not every link can be checked or assessed for safety and security. So now you're leaving the confines of USA Today and you end up somewhere else, and all of a sudden something pops up on your screen. You go, wow, where did that come from? It wasn't. Oftentimes people mistype a name of a website. So apple.com, APPLE, some people put three P's or two L's, and that takes you to a malicious web page that looks like Apple or does something totally different. You're going, where did this come from? What happened? And so accidents happen, but people also need to do their part to pay attention. Try not to click on things that aren't Apple related. If anything, stop, pause, take a moment, don't know. You guys are smart in your groups. You guys can talk to each other and say, hey, what is this crap? Or call me, call Jeff, call Mitch, call George. I mean, whoever you want, because you guys have a great network. And I think enough people are out there, you'd be able to get the right answer. But don't react and click, which most people want to do right away because they get nervous.
All right, great. Carol, can you unmute yourself and ask your question? Carol?
Yes, you've mentioned 3 antivirus softwares. Do you put Bitdefender in the same category as those? That is, it will work if Apple hasn't yet cleaned up a problem, but it may screw up good code.
I would say that's the same for all antivirus, all anti-spyware, period. If it's not made by Apple, I really hesitate on putting any of that stuff in an Apple computer unless you are. Now, what happens where people say, why do you recommend some antiviruses or anti-spyware for Apple? It's because a lot of colleges recommend that students going to school have to have something on their computers, period. That's just what the school requires. So for Apple to have a third-party one, Sophos antivirus does a pretty good job, and it's free for Apple. And so I say, put on Sophos. If you want a more robust antivirus, buy Viper. It's VIPRE. That's how you spell Viper for them. Or Malwarebytes, or a combination of both, if the students absolutely have to have it. Otherwise, most colleges are understanding they don't need it because Apple's already doing the work behind the scenes. They have their own security system. I tend to trust Apple more so because it's the fixes are coming right from mothership, and they know their product. They know better than Malwarebytes does. Now, I'm not saying that other people can't infiltrate Apple. What I'm saying is Apple knows their stuff, and they patch and fix when they can. So, and they don't always tell you what they do because it keeps the bad guy at bay. By not saying what was fixed, that lets the bad guy go, gee, did he update that and fix the Silver Sparrow, or did they not? And should I still try to infect people? So I think Apple is very good by not saying what they actually fix or what they actually address. Now, they may mention a few things, but Apple never is specific about what they do, which I like that because they're really quiet. They do. And honestly, how many of you folks have ever, as long as you had Apples, how many of you had major issues with viruses or spyware other than a pop-up like Mac Advanced Cleaner? I mean, most people have never had anything at all. Usually they click on something, I say, quit the browser, open again, you're fine, restart the computer. It's just stuff like that. It's never been anyone where I actually had to go in and fight a virus or a bug. Not had to do that in my time with Apple. And I'm around a lot of machines. Plus, I do things with machines other people don't do. So if I haven't been ding-donged yet, I've been quite lucky. So.
Great. Mike, can you unmute yourself and ask your question? Mike Wozniak.
Yeah. Hi, Dennis.
How you doing?
A long time ago, I was accused by a client of unwittingly passing on a Windows virus.
Okay,
So
that happened.
Because of that single event, I've run antivirus ever since. Is that a thing?
No, listen, again, so a lot of those things are macro viruses, and generally those come from Excel spreadsheets. And even then, when the recipient gets the spreadsheet, they're asked if they want to enable the macros or not. And most people just don't anyway, but some people do. That's kind of old school way of passing stuff. Not that it still doesn't exist, it does, but it's to the point where the antivirus may or may not detect it. People are getting more clever in how they hide things. But normally what happens in the past, things are now filtered, don't forget, when they pass through web pages. So when you send something, say your internet provider is Comcast, like we have here, if I send something from my computer and it runs through Comcast is scanning my file my email before it goes to you. And then now it may catch something, may not. It might say, hey, this email contains some suspicious stuff, or puts in spam or junk folder, or quarantines it altogether and sends a spam report. So things do pop up that way. It's removed. A lot of times it came from a lot of jokes and funny pictures back in the day that had something in them, and usually they were spreadsheets. Right now, the biggest one people see, it's constant. My kids get them all the time. It says, oh, it's a work order. You're overdue in payment. It's an Excel spreadsheet. It says they owe like $2,500, and if they click on it and open it, it does something malicious. Well, it does on Windows computers, but it doesn't on the Apple. But yes, can that be passed to somebody else? Technically, yes, but between Windows seeing it, because Windows has its own system built in by default, plus if you add something extra to it. So I think Windows Defender, plus if you add, I hate McAfee, but if you added McAfee or AVG or Windows, other things, as long as you're paying for an antivirus on the Windows systems, it should keep it. People will blame you for things, but it doesn't mean that if you put one of these programs on your computer, it will actually catch it in the email. It may or may not. But again, at the end of the day, it's not affecting you, it's affecting them. And Windows people should already be aware of that to begin with, because their system should be detecting it before and not worry about whether or not you stopped it.
So my guilt is unfounded.
You can stop feeling guilty, and tell them to buy a Mac, they'll do better.
All right, great. Wayne Mertz, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
That's actually related, the question I have is related to a home automation. And are you going to talk more about home automation,
Oh
Dennis?
yeah, that's coming up. Oh yeah, that's coming up.
All right.
All right, I'll wait till then.
I'll get through here quick so we can get to that.
Okay.
But just far as finishing the list of just the different things that are categorized under what malware is included, ransomware, everyone's worried like, oh my God, what if we get something? Ransomware has not been founded to actually cause any issues on the Mac so far. It's all been PC based. So there have been things, but they didn't do very well. So they were actually, they actually failed before they actually got started, which is great. The cryptocurrency miners are, been around because, you're starting to see more cryptocurrency come out there and mining for it to try to get it. It uses computing power. So people try to borrow your processor, like I mentioned before, to help them find it. But again, Apple's staying on top of that. And then spyware itself is just, our data is valuable and criminals want to get a hold of it every single day. That's what they want to do. Now, there are a couple other minor threats too. One's a Trojan horse, and you guys know how the story of the Trojan horse works. Things aren't always what they seem. But, and people go, well, give me a common example of a Trojan horse for Apple. Well, down below, if you look at the two cables, one's for the iPhone, iPad charger, and the other one's a Thunderbolt cable. And I put little skull and crossbones on her saying, if you buy something from somewhere or you don't know where it came from, I'll give you an example. Say you guys all go out Friday night to a bar, your favorite watering hole, and on top of the bar, they got this little charging station and they got 12 cords hanging out of it. You can plug in your Android phone, your iPad, or your iPhone, and you're charging, you're drinking, and you're eating, and you're charging, you're eating, you're drinking. But the problem is, you don't know if that bartender or the guy who set that stuff up for the bar, because usually a third-party company comes in and says, hey, we'll do advertising here and let everybody charge your phone for free. Well, those cords could actually have chips right at the end of the tips, right where the USB plug is and or where the iPhone is or Thunderbolt part is. You can put Wi-Fi in there, near-field communication, Bluetooth, all in that tiny little spot, and actually start stealing data out of devices. And so I tell people, if you've ever been to a restaurant, where you walk in the door, there's this big machine. It kind of looks like a big ATM, but it's light up with all these little doors and windows, and it's all lit up. And for like $5 or $10, you actually put your credit card in or money. You open the door up and you set your phone in there and you plug it in so it charges, and the door's locked. You get a key and you go off to dinner. Then you can come back later, uncharge it or take it out and use it. But that machine is so elaborate. Other than a charging station, which is just really a plug, a cable, and it charges. A guy was actually working on one. I was over in Jupiter, Florida at a restaurant, and the guy was servicing one. When he opened it up, there was more technology wires than an ATM had itself. And I'm going, there's something else going on here. There's no way it's just charging devices, because it doesn't take much to charge anything. And most chargers are tiny. So for this thing to have all this electronics, it was a little too much. So I got a feeling, I tell people, keep your own battery packs, bring your own charger, buy, we'll talk about later, what we call MFI, made for Apple product cables. They meet the certification. So that way you know that they meet the criteria and there's no funny business. Don't just walk off to like a dollar store and go, oh, look, 12 cables for $1. Be weary what would you get. A, they can burn up your device by not transferring data, electricity properly. And two, they could have something untoward going on. So know what you're doing with your equipment. Try not to cut corners. Just keep that in mind. And that's what we call USB or Thunderbolt hack. Now, just so if you guys are sleeping and haven't heard, Adobe Flash is dead. So if Adobe Flash is on your computer, please uninstall it. It's real simple to do. Never worry about having to update your Adobe Flash ever again, because it is officially dead. sad part is Steve Jobs announced it dead back in 2009 or 2010, and now we finally buried it as of last year on the 31st. So, but it's gone, it's out of here, so that's good news. So, no doubt hackers are going to continue to try to disrupt our lives and make everything a pain. They're trying to, you know, they are starting to find ways, like governments are circumventing some of the rules of Apple when Apple says, hey, we don't give up, you know, data and privacy because we're real secure with our customers. Well, they kind of gave in to China with keeping China's customers in database and encrypted keys over in China where they have access to it on the government side. So hopefully things won't change here or in the EU or other places, but we'll see. Now, just remember, Apple puts gazillions of dollars into making sure they get the best stuff out there. And don't forget, bad guys are doing the same. So they're trying to find a way to get into these devices and do it invisibly. And because of that one thread I told you earlier about how you can piggyback Apple's Find My device network and not be detected. So those are the kind of attacks we're going to see in the future. No malware bytes, no Norton or Bitdefender will ever find these things. Now, they may be added later if there's a patch, but they're not going to find them. These are things that even Apple's going to have it difficult because, you know, if you can't see behind the curtain, if your data is protected by a wall and all of a sudden their stuff's behind the wall and not in front of the wall, Apple's not going to be able to see it. So it's actually doing something behind the scenes of your stuff, and Apple will have no way to detect it or see it. So they're working very hard while they're trying to keep you private and safe and secure. They're also trying to make sure no one else is taking advantage of that as well behind the scenes where Apple's keeping you safe. So these threats are getting bigger and bigger and scary. So I'm sure in the next 5 years, we're probably going to see a change in things. And I'm sure you heard coming up that Apple's thinking about getting rid of passwords and moving to pass keys. So, and I'm sure Jeff and Mitch will talk more about that coming up in your end of the month lecture. So right now, as a state, I will tell you, I do not recommend antivirus or anti-spyware from third parties unless you absolutely have to for work or for school. But realistically, it's not needed. I think it causes more harm than good. And it's also a false sense of security, in my opinion. So I would say just Apple's doing their job behind the scenes. They wall guard and everything out, and they keep you safe. And Apple's real big about that. And to date, Apple has patched and fixed everything that we know of. So, and so the biggest thing I tell people is install your updates, your phone, do the security updates for your Mac. I know they take a while to do, sometimes 40 minutes or longer. Please do those. They're done for a reason. And Apple's not going to tell you. Oftentimes you go, oh, it says it's just updating like a couple new emojis. I could care less. Well, yeah, you get a couple new emojis, but they're also fixing a whole big security enclave they're not telling you about. So please do the updates. Apples aren't immune, but you know, their ecosystem is, you know, we pay a lot of money for these products, and Apple really delivers good quality. I've never complained about my computers and my phones. There are times they do some silly things, but at the end of the day, I have no issues compared to any Windows or Android user. Been happy with their products for a long time. I'm mad they cost a fortune, but they really do deliver, and I've been safe and happy with everything I have. Now, that could change in the future, but at least at this point, I don't want you worrying about things that you don't have to spend extra money on or try to make sure you have in place because they're just simply not needed for now.
Okay, question. So for those of us who will be uninstalling Malwarebytes, do we just throw the app in the trash, or are there other files that we need to also locate and get rid of?
Usually by throwing the app in the trash is one thing, but if there might be, if you look in the utilities folder located in your applications folder, there might be an uninstaller for Malwarebytes.
Okay.
So there is, you can go ahead and uninstall it, but usually dragging the app to the trash is just fine. It may have a subfolder or something in the libraries. That's not hurting anything or taking up any space.
Mm-hmm.
But
Right.
it's not bad. You know, I do like Malwarebytes. I'm not telling you not to get rid of it either, but in the same token, it's not really offering you any protection. And so, and other than generic stuff, I mean, as long as you know where you're going and doing things, Apple's been doing it behind the scenes. So I kind of feel weird adding something else extra that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I'm afraid to break something that's healthy versus something that's bad.
I agree. Right. Okay. Malware bytes uninstalls. All right. Heidi, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
The business about malware bytes is very confusing to me because actually the Genius Bar at the Apple Store installed that, helped me install that, recommended it, and checked and used it. Now this was maybe a couple years ago, but used it to check some things and get rid of some things that I
No,
had
well,
on my
I'm
computer.
not, so it all depends upon, so again, it's all case by case. And what happens is, first off, Apple is not supposed to recommend third-party products if it's not theirs. They're not supposed to. However, Genius Bar people do tend to say, hey, you know, do this, do that kind of thing. But Apple already has its own system in place. And a lot of guys that work in these Genius Bars, some are, don't laugh, are former Windows people coming over to Apple and working for Apple, getting a job and learning the Apple thing. So, and there's many of the converts, which I think is great. Problem is, Windows people still think the Windows way. And that's, it's kind of hard when they'll think antivirus, anti-spyware, gotta have it, you know, and that's what they do.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, honestly, I doubt it fixed or did anything. Now, Apple, if you ask them, would you recommend something? And some people will, they would say like Sophos, because it's free. They might say Malwarebytes. I don't doubt that, but it's not, I mean, if you go to Apple's webpage, they don't tell you what they recommend. They don't come out and tell you to do that. They tell you what their system does. So you have to keep that in mind. It's not.
Well, subsequently, you know, so now a couple of years later, I'm having trouble with my Hewlett Packard printer, and I go to Hewlett Packard. I call them for support, and they're telling me, they come and look at my computer. That I let them do that. I'll never do that again. But they didn't hurt anything. But they said, "Oh, I can't. I didn't write down the terminology. I did write it down at the moment, but I don't have it anymore." They said I had some kind of a, they didn't say virus, but some kind of a bug, and that was causing the problem with the printer, and so on and so forth. And they wanted to charge me some very large amount of money per year to do something to prevent that problem. And it didn't sound right to me. So I called Apple for support. But one of the first things they had me do was, because I was concerned I had some issue, they had me run Malwarebytes.
Well, at that point, I'm going to tell you why they did that, because of what you just said. So you just gave me the answer to why they told you that. So first off, I will tell you, if anyone has a problem with any technology out there, whether it's Lutron for controls, Hewlett Packard for printers, Epson, Canon, Nikon, whether it's Microsoft, Adobe, call the company direct. Go on the webpage, look for the official webpage, and look for the official number under contacts. Do not Google Adobe support. Do not Google Hewlett Packard support, because you're going to get all the fake ones first. A lot of the ones that offer fake stuff, especially, they want to get in the computer right away. Now you let the guy or girl in the computer, they only have to be in for a few minutes to start accessing and opening doors to things. While you're in bed and the computer's on, they come back and suck data out. Now your identity becomes an issue, and so do other things.
So I probably did Google to get the Hewlett Packard telephone number.
Yeah. So
but if you're telling me, if I had really talked to Hewlett Packard real support, they wouldn't have done what?
No, they walk you through things. In fact, they will do what they call an assisted support, where they can see your screen, but they can't click anything. And they'd say, okay, go to hp.com, and you do. And they say, okay, now click on drivers, download the support. You do. You say, type in your printer. You say PhotoSmart 2550. And then they go, okay, it'll say Mac. Okay, download latest driver. You do that. They're watching you through the steps and walking through it. And they are not physically in your computer. They're just watching you through it and talking you through it.
And they're not going to charge me. I mean, it was $600.
Yeah, that's fake. Hewlett Packard does not do that. In fact,
that's so interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, that happens quite often, and happens to more people. And I'm glad you brought that up, because
well, it happened to another friend. So
it happens.
We thought it was, especially thought it was real, because he didn't even talk to me about it. You know,
at the time, most printer issues are due to the Wi-Fi, due to a router. Honestly, Sometimes if it's a newer printer, they have issues. It's because of it didn't get permission to do something via the security and preferences tab now on Catalina and Big Sur, that we have to get permission to access things. Because sometimes when you scan from the computer or the printer itself, it wants to store it in your documents folder or wherever your scans folder is on your computer, and you have to give it permission to access files and folders. So it may act goofy. I've had routers where they lost the address number of the Wi-Fi, and then even though it's working and the printer's on and your computer's connected, and maybe someone else in your household can print, but you can't, oftentimes unplugging the router, wait a few minutes, plug it back in, it re-gets everybody's addresses in the room, and all of a sudden everything prints just fine again.
So
And-
the router itself. I've been-
Heidi, we have to move on. We cannot do this.
All right, well, I can talk more about that later. If you want to get my information, I can talk to you more on the phone about it, so that way make your life easier.
Thank you.
I'd be happy to.
All right.
Home
right.
automation won't take long, but I will tell you, home automation is great because, it provides convenience, remote monitoring, hands-free control, and even energy savings. So that's actually very nice. And we all look for the creature comforts of convenience and funness. Well, also comes with the cons. And a lot of that is the complexity, the cost. Some services don't work when the internet's down, and not all devices talk to each other. And unfortunately, it's the same as anything else. People don't want to spend money. They might buy an Alexa, but don't want to buy all the Lutron Alexa support equipment, which might be very expensive, whether it's a doorbell, a light switch, a thermostat or something. They cost more money. So they tend to go to like Amazon and go, well, these all are Amazon rated, so I'll just buy those. And they're, I can get 10 for $60 versus 10 for $700, big difference. But you get what you pay for. And not everything's safe, not everything's secure. But these are all the different types of things you see on your screen that are all, and plus many more that can be adjusted via Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. And as you're starting to find out, AirTags Apple's introduced, where you can keep track of your keys. In theory, you can keep track of your vehicle, or anywhere you put an AirTag. In theory, you should be able to find it. Especially, I'm not telling you to put them on your kids so you can track them, but I'm sure someone's going to do that. But Amazon Sidewalk, I'm sure you guys heard a little bit about that coming up. Basically, all of Amazon's equipment is kind of going to be like, I don't know how many Star Trek people are in the room, but years ago in the Next Generation, they had something called the Borg. It was a collective of half human, half droid kind of thing. And when one droid saw something or learned something, the entire hive or group learned at the same time as one collective. So Amazon is going to operate all their devices as a collective. So really, everything's going to piggyback everything else, from your neighbors to yours or somebody else's, moving and going all over the place in order to get better coverage, better things. It's good, and to move data around. It's going to be a little scary because it gives Amazon a lot more control of your home.
Dennis,
go ahead.
I have several Ring devices which are owned by Amazon.
Right.
And according to them, there are only actually 3 of those devices that do that.
For now.
Not yet, for now.
That's what I'm saying. So what I'm saying is this is going to happen because they talk about this opt-out phase. And once it hits the news, everybody will opt out. And then what's going to happen is news will die down, right? And then a new equipment starts coming out, and it's going to be on by default, unless you pay attention to these things, or you buy a third-party thing that works with Amazon and doesn't have an opt-out feature on their equipment. So if you don't pay attention, I guess at the end of the day, what I try to tell people, there's a lot of smart home stuff, a lot of great stuff, but how much do you really need? Everybody wants things simple and easy, but you also want to be safe and secure. You can't have both. And I'm going to tell you some of the areas of concern so you understand. And this answers what you said. There's only a couple things right now, but more to follow. New models and versions are always coming out 24/7, 365. Everybody's out trying to do somebody else. Amazon has been very smart. I like the Arrow Wi-Fi mesh wireless system. They're the first ones. Arrow got bought by Amazon, and I love that wireless system. It works great. Now, I don't use the Echo. I don't use the Amazon Dot. I don't use any Amazon Alexa things at all, because there are court cases pending about even when the mic is muted, it's still recording and prefetching data. So I don't trust any of that stuff. So if it's not in my house, that's one less thing I got to worry about. But I do have clients that use that stuff religiously because they say, hey, turn my lights on, play some music. It is kind of cool. I mean, it's awesome technology, but I think it's getting to the point now where I start to really get nervous about what it actually is doing, or versus what they tell me it is or isn't doing. The big problem too is you're going to see is discontinued support, even for less than 3 years of age on the device. So you buy a Nest thermostat generation 1 and it works great, but then generation 2 does something, you wait, you buy the generation 3, which we're talking less than 3 years, the third model comes out and it fixes some issues and it's got a better screen or better whatever, a newer app, a newer connectivity. Well, they may not be updating the support, the firmware and software it takes to operate these devices. And so because of that, you may have a security glitch or breach. I mean, hacking a hospital through the AC system happened, not through the mainframe computers, not through someone sitting at a desk, but it went through a open thermostat to get into a hospital system to take over a computer system because it's all on the same network. So these are the breaches, things you never thought about before are now become another issue of security. Everybody thinks about the doors and windows in a house and a garage door. Now you got to focus on, oh, now it's my thermostat, it's my printer, it's my Alexa, it's my coffee pot, my toaster, my blender, my oven, my dishwasher, washer dryer. This is where you got to go, oh God, the whole house is after me. And that's scary, because that's what we're doing. Now, there's some great things. Software upgrades may force a newer model. I've seen it already. I had a gentleman who's got iPads on a wall to control all his Sonos stuff in his house. Very nice. But the new Sonos app needed him to have a newer iPad. Got the newer iPad, doesn't fit in a wall socket, so he has to have the wall cut and remodified. And then the newest app also says it can't update the older Sonos equipment, so now he's got to buy some new Sonos equipment to keep it all working in harmony like it did up before a couple updates. So now he's got to spend money, which means we got to spend money. Multi-devices, as I said, multi-security breaches, and honestly, video doorbells, smart cameras, speakers, microphones, like we talked before, can all be hijacked or become tools for hackers. And those things do happen from time to time. So I always ask people, let's keep it simple. Do we need all these headaches? Does it matter that we're wirelessly connected to a toaster, for example? And it's the truth. Do we need that? So, and I hate to tell people, like the dishwashers, washers, and dryers and things, these are items you physically have to be in front of to load, put a piece of bread in, whether you, push it down, or whether you got to throw the clothes in and put soap in. And do I need to go after a dishwasher, after you rinse, put all the dishes in, get the soap, the jet dry, close the door, instead of just pushing a button? Now you got to go find your phone, connect to the Wi-Fi, get the app, make sure it's connected, find your product, hit the button and say start. I don't understand why we're doing this, but okay, somebody's happy. But so I tell people, look, I know it wants to try to make our lives better, but is it really doing that? So think twice. If there's something you really want that's wireless, great. Otherwise, I'd say try to avoid a lot of it, because I think it's more things to break, more things to go wrong. I just, it's better when a washer and dryer, when the belt broke, they come out and fix the belt, as opposed now I got to change logic boards because it won't talk to Wi-Fi or something. I don't know. It's just getting to be goofy.
I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
What do you think about if this, then that?
Well, what do you think about it?
I stopped using it. It was great when I would come home, and because of the geo tagging, it would turn on all the lights that I would want turned on. But then I started thinking about who's getting access to that information.
Exactly. And that you answered it very nicely. Thank you. I think that's the problem with technology. I mean, for the most part, a lot of stuff is safe, but there's so many hands in the cookie jar now, so many different companies. We don't know who's making it. Is it safe? Is it not safe? Because even if it's just a light bulb, how do we know that Samsung light bulb doesn't have something untoward in it that we're allowing to get access to our networks and our equipment? We just don't know. And I just think we're setting ourselves up for failure. I think I kind of like the idea of just walking into a room, flipping a light switch on, flipping it off. That's how I grew up. I don't need to have anything else more than that, but some people do. Now I understand if you're older, you got a walker and it's hard to get out of bed and you try to get to the bathroom, you say, turn on my lamp or my bathroom light. Absolutely. I believe in that. But even a clapper works just as well too. Clap on, clap off. So we joked about it growing up. I think it's good technology. So it's kind of crazy, but just keep in mind, try not to go hog wild on smart homes. And the problem is, just when you get everything the way you want it, it's going to be out of date. And now you're thinking twice about updating all your equipment and getting more stuff. Real quick, just going to go over some things about third-party peripherals.
This-
If you have any questions first?
Go ahead, Wayne.
Yes, my question earlier was about Thread with regard to home automation. Thread is one of those new features that Apple, Google, and Amazon have hooked up together on to kind of communicate with the home automation devices. Have you heard much about Thread security? It replaces like some things like Wi-Fi or Zigbee or Z-Wave.
No, not yet. I still think it's everything's still coming into play for this stuff. And I'm waiting to see. There's some new other technology coming too. And I'm starting to wonder, that's why I said they're talking about these pass keys Apple's alluding to. I think you're going to see a lot of that incorporated because the devices will be able to do it and be more secure because it's specific to the device itself. I think, again, home automation, like I said, it scares me a little bit only because there's too many players in the game. And, I do trust Apple. I don't know how I feel about Google at all. I think they're always out to get our information. Amazon, these are the companies that I get nervous about. They're trying to invade our home 10 ways a Sunday, and they've done it without being forthcoming with what data they've been acquiring from us. So even though they say they're keeping you safe, they're really not. So again, if you think you really need some of this stuff or want to go down that road, we'll see as technology advances here. Actually, by the end of the year, you're going to see a lot of new things coming to market. And then the new Consumer Electronics Show is going to have a lot of things popping up. It's going to be cool, but again, it's up to you. Again, we're talking about security, we're talking about safety, and I always worry about just putting all my keys now out there with all these different companies on things I never had to do that with before. And so if it's something you really want, then you're only as good as they keep it up to date, and it is, as far as our understanding and our equipment goes. I think Windows people have more chance of having issues than Apple, honestly, because of the way our system is. And no joke, right before COVID, Microsoft announced that they're actually going to try to focus on doing Windows operating system with the Unix Linux-based core, kind of like Apple, to move forwards because basically Windows is meant to end of the line. And you're going to see Google, the Chromebooks and Google's technology. So it's going to be Apple and Google in a race right now. Microsoft's trying to play catch up. And so I think.
Well, Dennis, I'm sorry, Dennis, I just wanted to mention that I'm a geek. I don't keep things simple.
Yeah, I love it. Well, you know what? I appreciate you too, because you know what? Without you, then I can't, we can't say, hey, it worked good or it didn't work, or here's some of the issues we have or don't have. So no, I'm the same way. I
Okay. All right.
I don't know what happened.
I don't know what happened either. All right. All right. Thank you, Wayne. Does anyone else have a question for Dennis? Eckert, go ahead. Unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, Dennis, you have a few times mentioned crypto mining and that computers are being used to do the mining. I know it's a very complex thing apparently, but can you try to explain in layman terms very briefly what this really does to a computer? And the question is, why not? There are supercomputers. If they are so powerful, couldn't they do the crypto mining in seconds?
They can, but that's for people who have access to the supercomputers. So the hackers, they're trying to just get into everybody else's computers. So give me an example. The more computers you can get to do it, you're actually creating superclusters by taking a group of smaller computers. And it's unknowingly to the people sitting in front of their own everyday machine, whether it's a laptop or desktop. Yes, you're right. Superclusters are huge, and they do massive computing and teraflops and things we can't even comprehend. But everyone is in a race now to uncover as much of the cryptocurrency to mine for as much as they can, as fast as they can. And so the more computers, the more computing power makes a difference. And even a small computer like mine sitting right now talking to you on my desk still offers help and incentive to help crypto mining. Now, what does it do to your computer? It takes up bandwidth, obviously, between your ISP. So if you got CenturyLink and you've got a really slow speed, it's already probably, getting close to tapping you out and things go really slow and you can't figure out why. It does raise the processors and you can't figure out why, the computer's, tacking out faster, but it's because it's working stuff behind the scenes. But again, you're not going to see an activity monitor because it's invisible. You're not going to go, well, gee, I understand why. I turn the computer off, turn it back on, it's doing the same thing. So at that point you go, well, maybe I got to get a new Mac, or usually Windows people saying, oh, I got to get a new machine. And then if they reload that same software that had the same bug in it, then they're just reintroducing it to their newest system. I don't think Apple has to worry about it too much because Apple, like I said, that stuff's been looked at and shut off for now. It didn't get very far, but crypto mining is an issue. It's out there in the PC world. So, and I know people do it on purpose as well. So,
Thank you. James Corsica, can you please unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hi, Dennis. I think this topic is security adjacent. I've not ever upgraded to Big Sur on my MacBook Pro, and there's a new operating system coming out. I can't remember its name. Begins with an M. Monterey. Can I just leapfrog
yes,
Big Sur and go from Catalina to Monterey? And would you recommend doing that? Or
yes, go right to Monterey.
Does it have the concerns that Big Sur had?
Well, okay. So like anything, I always tell people, I always wait a month at least before I install the newest. I have one computer I do off the bat because I have to do it because everybody else is going to do it first. But on my real stuff that I use for myself, I always wait a good month or so. Big Sur was a rough start for a lot of people, and especially on computers that was able to run it, it actually had glitches or problems. And I had a few that got bricked and went to an Apple store and people bought new computers. It was really sucky. I think Monterey is going to have that solved. I know it's going to be more designed or written for the M1 processors, not as much features on the Intel, but I'm sure it'd be seamless. I'm okay with, I always do it because sometimes I've had computers where I skipped 2 operating systems and went up to the latest one it could run. You don't have to go in sequence. There's no need for that.
All right.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. Jim Cutler, can you please unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, I'll make a comment first. I didn't put my production machine on Big Sur until 0.3, and then I was willing. The question is Chrome browser. That seems to be well-promoted malware by Amazon. You want to comment on that?
I don't like Chrome browser because it's written by Google. And from my understanding is they say it's safe by people not hacking it, yes, because it's a brand new, because it's just out there. Or especially the Chromebooks are new because people aren't really writing for the platform just yet, and they are now. But I don't like Chrome because it's even the electronic medical records, the hospital systems, a lot of companies say, oh, we use Google Chrome. I'm not sure why. I think because they like it because they use Google products. But I'm not a fan of Google Chrome. I tell people use Safari and use Firefox, the fastest and 2 safest browsers out there, hands down. I try now. Sometimes, unfortunately, you'll get places that say you must have a Google Chrome to get into something. Well, I think that's kind of pointless if you're writing your web page for one browser to be optimized. And I found out if you actually go to the same web page on Firefox or Safari, you can get in and do the same exact things with no issues. So, but people are being trained at these companies to only recommend and do Google Chrome. And so that way they don't have to train them on one thing and not 10 other browsers. So I'm just not a fan of it. But if you like it, I'm not going to switch you from it.
Great. I got a quick comment about that, and then I'm going to let Mitch ask his question. All right. So there are some things that Google Chrome will allow that Safari will not allow. And I thought if Safari and Apple won't allow it, why am I letting Google Chrome have access to it? So,
well, I agree.
Okay.
I agree with you.
All right. Go ahead.
Well, just Java, like Java, not JavaScript, but Java itself by Oracle, a lot of things still run in Java. Now, Java's been updated, but Safari doesn't allow Java to run because Firefox stopped that support a couple years ago. Internet Explorer, I had to do something for a client recently. I had to go on their Windows 10, open up the old Internet Explorer app to download the latest version of Java I could get to run something for them to have happen on their computer. And it sucks because Apple doesn't give us that opportunity. And Java has been security breached for years, but they are getting better. So I think in time, Java will come back on the Apple where we can run it again as they work closer with Apple and the way things are going.
All right, great. Mitch, you're up.
Yeah, hi, Dennis.
Hey, Mitch.
Can you talk about the big picture of ransomware? They're talking more and more about this since we've had some big ransomware issues with corporations. What's the real threat that they could come in and just literally shut down the entire grid in the United States? And then on a smaller scale, they started talking about pretty soon you're going to see ransomware for individual iPhones or handheld devices. Can you just talk about that big picture stuff and what you see coming there and what they're really doing to prevent that?
Well, what they're doing to prevent it, they're not going to tell you about because you never advertise your defenses. But I can tell you they're working about it behind the scenes. Now, ransomware as a whole, as you guys have found out and heard, that fades off. All right. So what happens is like the pipeline or the let's just say Spirit Airlines had a ransomware attack and they had to pay it just to get their computer system back. People are doing it for monetary value and are proving they get into a system and hold you hostage. Unfortunately, example like the Hoover Dam for electricity and hydroelectric power, that was all gears and levers, turning valves and switches manually. There was no real computer system that was working from the internet until latter day today kind of stuff, where in the last 20 years, I'm sure it's all been hooked up electronically. So you cut 20 jobs, physical labor, and let a computer take care of something. So that now the hydro stuff is controlled by somebody in Nebraska versus somebody on site at the dam itself. And so what we've done now is we've made everything computerized. Well, guess what? It connects to the internet. And most of the time, these are all Windows-based computers. And so again, more flaws and ways, and like anything, people are trying to get into the systems. It isn't the old days where you thought somebody pulled up outside your house and trying to get onto your Wi-Fi and you're worried they're going to get into your computer or do something untoward that way. Well, what's happening now is you have people go to work for these companies. I hate to use the word sleeper cells, but you got people that are untoward employees gathering, intel and data and trying to take it back and do something where they can get into it or have a breach on the inside. It's always going to happen. No matter what. I do think the way Apple's going about things, we are very safe with Apple products than we are anything else on the planet. Not that they're not susceptible. I mean, you could have some bad people at Apple decide to go the wrong way with it, and then we're all going to be paying the piper. I tell you what worries me the most. It's not Apple and the employees at Apple. It's the factories and the manufacturers of the components and the supply chain to make all the parts that come together to make an iPhone. So all those chips and things that get squished down into, a micro little cell that, everything runs off of, who's to say they don't put something in the code? They get the blueprints to build it. Who's to say they don't add something into the blueprints we don't see? And once it's compressed into a wafer or inside a transistor, we can't get to it. And so those are things I worry about that, at some point, can China flip a switch and our electricity go off and our water stop flowing and Wall Street shuts down and, when we're in trouble? Absolutely. That can happen anytime. Anytime we put all of our eggs in one basket, and I think with technology, people get lazy. They want to have computer controls. They want to have a pretty screen. They want to flip a button, without having to manually get up and do something. I do think, just like Alexa, turn on a light instead of getting up and flipping a switch, because there's a lot that goes into play to make that happen when you say, Alexa, turn on a switch. But at the end of the day, I do think ransomware is going to be more and more prominent. And a lot of times the government will tell you never pay. I've worked 2 cases in town here where we've actually paid ransomware, and we did get the decoder ring, so to speak, and got the data back. But like I said, I work with most people nowadays. Like, look, as long as your data is backed up, companies like Dropbox, when you got stuff in their cloud, they got versioning. So if all your stuff's up to date and you got a virus right now, you can go back an hour ago and get your data back, minus the ransom stuff and virus, and you'd be back up and running again. So as long as you keep your stuff up to date and secure and backed up, I think you're fine. But as far as ever preventing ransomware from getting to our systems, It's a cat and mouse game. It's like whack-a-mole. 1 minute we're winning, next minute another one pops up. I think it's constantly what we're doing is playing whack-a-mole with computer stuff. And people, I mean, imagine, like I said, 1 billion iPhones out there. You're right, Mitch. That'd be great to take down the whole iPhone system if you could in one fell swoop with ransomware. The good thing is most of the stuff is built into the chip onto the phone itself, as far as people getting access. And as long as the clouds are safe and secure, and we got versioning, I think even if a cloud gets hit, they got ways, because they're doing what they can, because it's all e-commerce. They want our money. We want our stuff. And I think they want to keep it as safe as possible. Nothing's ever guaranteed, but for the most part, we've done pretty well. But I do think you're going to see more and more ransomware things, but they're also in industries that really don't stay up to date with the times. That's your meat packing, that's your electrical, that's your water systems. This is what we got to worry about. I mean, look how our infrastructure is. I don't care whose administration's in office. Our country does need updates and upkeep, and we just, there's things that have to happen all over, state to state, nationally. And not to mention, I'm sure I can't speak for other countries, but they got their issues too. I think we're more secure than most. But until something happens, you realize how vulnerable you really are.
Thank you, Dennis.
Yep.
Excellent presentation.
Yes,
Yep,
thank
and
you.
I know we're almost out of time, but I want to answer more questions if you got them. But real
Well-
quick on recommendations, and I'll make this available. This slideshow, I'll send it to George Neckert, and whoever wants it, he can have it and get it up there. But just look for the MFI certified logo. A lot of times you'll see it where it says made for iPhone, iPod, and iPad. Those are important because they're made for Apple products. Works with HomeKit, works for the watch, works with CarPlay. They've actually met Apple's guidelines for things that do work. I put the light up cords on the screen there because there are brands that are certified and brands that aren't, and people don't want to spend the money on the better ones. And so they buy the cheaper ones, which can cause problems. One thing about cords is they have to be able to handle the data transfer and the energy being transferred from them. And sometimes they actually can cause your burn the port out on the iPhone or iPad if that's too little or too much power. It's kind of funny, but that does happen. I tell people avoid the knockoffs where you get 10 for a buck at Walmart kind of thing or a dollar store. And avoid super long cables 10 foot or greater. They could be problematic where data doesn't flow or it's intermittent, or it actually can, because electricity's got to travel further and so does the data, it could actually be causing problems. So I always say, my wife's got one that's like 14 foot long, goes from the front of the truck to the back of the truck and side to side, and she loves it. And I refuse to use that. But I told her, if your phone breaks, you got to buy a new one. So.
All right, thank you.
But hubs and docks, I mean, all that you'll see on the screen here, these are all the names. Just buy the brands that I have listed. They're very good products. Don't buy cheap stuff. The M1 processor, you're going to see I have an iMac in the bottom left corner there. Everything's moving over to the USB-C connector and Thunderbolt. And so if all the Type A stuff, the older connections, you should have see here all the connections. Get one of these little docking stations or big hubs. That way you can plug in more of your old stuff plus the new stuff and give yourself now Ethernet cable. I'm surprised Apple didn't include Ethernet on a new computer. It's kind of disappointing, but now you have to buy an adapter and plug it in or get one of these boxes to do all the work. So these things work really good. And there's a bunch of them, different ones out there. They can be pricey, somewhere from $130 up to $300, $400. So don't be shocked, but they do multiple things. And they can add, if you want another monitor onto your iMac or iPad, or your MacBooks and things, it'll allow you to have more screens up, which is kind of nice as well for most. Any other questions?
It is time to go. We don't have time for any more questions, Dennis. Sorry, but
all right. Well, email
thank you.
me if you want, and then I'll be glad to answer them. And I can call you and call me on the phone. It'd be easy to talk to you. So I'm open to all you guys. So anytime you need help or have questions, please feel free to call or text.
Thank you. All right, George, all yours.
Dennis, thank you very, very much. This was a great presentation. And again, we really, really appreciate your time and effort and keeping us abreast of what's going on. And if we can have everyone unmute themselves and thank Dennis.
Great job.
Dennis.
Thank you,
Dennis, thank you very much.
Dennis.
Thank you.
You guys are
Good job,
both
Dennis.
Outstanding, Dennis.
Very good indeed.
Appreciate it.
Enjoyed it.
Great.
I hope it
Good
helped.
job.
Thank you much. Thank you so much.
Okay, guys, have a great day.
Thanks, Dennis.